This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. In each episode, we bring you information, insights, ideas, and interviews from some of the industry's top thought leaders. Head to mediasalesmastery.com to help pick the topic and guide the show.
This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. I'm your host, Jamie Wood. Bit of a different one this week. We're getting near the end of season 3. Can't believe that. And instead of probably doing a new interview this week, we're actually going to go back and revisit some of the most commonly raised issues over the past season from some of the listening audience. So we're really kind of revisiting the listener questions and just kind of putting that together in a montage. Won't lie, it's been pretty challenging continuing with the podcast over the last 6 months. Started a new job, which is great. I'm a new father as well, so got that going on, as well as just the craziness of COVID. So thank you for sticking in there and supporting the show, and the fact that people are still kind of giving me feedback and sending questions has really motivated me to keep going, despite the fact that sometimes life is kind of getting in the way. One of the things we're going to do next year is probably mix up the format a little bit. So not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but I'm just keen to kind of reinvigorate the podcast and the theme and maybe see if we can kind of evolve into something a little bit different. I'm really liking the fact that everybody that I've asked has been very, very open and very willing to, make time to volunteer to be on the show. So if you know someone that you want to hear from, if you know a topic you want to hear about, if you've got any sort of feedback on some stuff that you may be left wanting for with the episodes, the view is that next year it's going to be basically the first and third Monday of every month we put a new episode up. So I want to make sure that it's delivering value and that you're feeling like, this is something that you want to listen to, subscribe to, rate, and also tell your friends about. Stay tuned for the podcast coming up in a couple of weeks. Great interview from a gentleman in Kuala Lumpur, and I'm waiting to hear back on whether I can get somebody based in South Africa to be my final interview for the year or my first interview for next year. In the meantime, if I don't speak to anybody, have an amazing Christmas, amazing New Year. It's been a hard-fought year, but hopefully this podcast to some extent has helped with the hard times and maybe just topping up the motivation or giving a tip or two on how to deal with what has been a really challenging market.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
This one wasn't actually submitted. It was a conversation, and I kind of scribbled it all down, but I just thought it would be a great question for you and I to reflect on, because it's an interesting, challenge that I think this individual's having. So I'm going to read the question and then I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it, Andrea. So the question is, or the statement was, maybe you should ask or you should talk about when one supplier doesn't set any standards. And so the context is, we have one major competitor who is completely devaluing our product in our market. They discount well beyond what's necessary. They offer premium inventory as value add. They don't charge production, and they condition clients to expect all of this from us as well. I tell my sales manager this is why we're losing business all the time, but we've had no adjustment to our pricing or processes in response. What do you do when your competitors are ruining your marketplace? So it's a pretty sort of emotional kind of situation here, this individual. I know they've been struggling for a long time. What's your initial, impression just reflecting on that one?
Yeah, I think we've all been there at times where we've felt that someone's, really dropping their pants on pricing or giving things away that we think they shouldn't. There's a lot of factors that could be involved here. And I think one of the really important things to do in these situations is to deal with the facts. So do they really know exactly what is being charged by this competitor? Is there anything that might be involved that they're not aware of? Like, for example, is this competitor part of a larger organization where they're getting more money in another area and this is offsetting it? So there might be other factors at play. But I think one of the things is if someone is really too low with their pricing and giving away good inventory or product, then they wouldn't be making budget and the business would be struggling. If this business is making their budgets or targets, then maybe they are priced correctly. I mean, there's a pretty easy mathematical equation you can do on your pricing, how much inventory you've got at like whatever the fill level you think you can get to is maximum fill level, call it like 92% or something, or 87%. You know, is it a channel that has limited inventory or unlimited inventory? You know, there's a lot of factors at play there, but I think if they can deal with facts, you know, is it a channel where there's a lot of measurement involved and you can get figures on how much revenue the competitor's writing, etc. You know, and you could probably have a look at their annual report and see what, if they're a public company, and see what they're reporting on, and then, you know, deal with those facts, because I think it's easy to get caught up in hearsay and kind of some numbers that, you know, it might be you know, one example, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's happening in every occasion.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I also think, you know, the one thing I've struggled with sales teams is it can often be hard to get good data sometimes, because people will always default to saying price was a determining factor. And my honest belief as to why that is because price is the one thing that they probably don't have total control over. You know, it's no one's going to come in and say I lost the business because I did a shit job with the idea, or, you know, we messed up their last campaign, or we don't have a great knowledge of the client and therefore we missed the mark. No one's going to necessarily cop to that. I mean, some of them do, like, you know, and as long as they apply those learnings to the next one, that's fine. I would say the other thing here, and you're absolutely right, like, you've got to look a little bit deeper than just we're losing it because of these three things. Oftentimes when you're losing business, you might potentially kind of think that those are the things that are the issue, because they're often the things that cause friction in your sales process. So like when you're getting pushback from a client, oftentimes it is production, it is price. It sometimes can be, you know, a competitor has done something great and they'll use that as a bit of a yardstick for what they think great service is.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can misattribute that good feedback or those kind of issues you have in your sales process with being the reason why you're losing. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow, and I know this individual who asked me, and I know this isn't potentially what's happening with them, but, you know, what's your thoughts? Like, so, you know, you've probably, like you said, you've had this experience before where you're running a big national sales team and maybe there has been a couple of bad weeks where you really are seeing a competitor do this. What would your response be once you pull that data together and have a bit more of a kind of view of what's going on? What might be the next step there to combat that?
Yeah, I mean, use the data to inform, you know, to either support your current strategy or to help you kind of adjust it with whatever the data is telling you. You know, is that supporting what you're currently doing, or do you need to make some changes in that? You know, let's, again, try and take the emotion out of it, deal with the facts, and have a look at your strategy, and have a look at, there's only so many things that you can adjust within your sale for the client. There's a couple of major factors there, and we all know what they are, and, you know, it's that kind of, it's the P's, right? And and, you know, to sense check them, you know, have you got the right people with the right product, you know, with the right price, and, you know, in the right place for the, you know, client to access it. They're the 4 Ps, aren't they? I think they are. And you know, and have a look at those and kind of sense check them all. But I think you can go down a bit of a deep dark hole of if you're not using facts and data. And also, we're also looking at business lost. I think, as importantly, let's have a look at the people that are buying you and look for the themes around that. Why, you know, talk to the ones that are as much as the ones that aren't, because the random reason over here that you lost this piece of business is probably less valuable. The information is probably less valuable about that one thing than it is about the hundreds of clients that are buying you.
Yeah, such a good point. I mean, I think an exercise that we don't do enough sometimes is, particularly when you are looking at your competition too closely, is you do have a tendency to look at all their shiny toys and you almost kind of miss an opportunity to reflect on what you have, that they'd be looking across at you with envy, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's the social media example you gave before that, it was, you know, it seemed that people were buying it because of this, you know, this 4% social media piece over here, not the 96% of the other. I think there can be a bit of that in it as well. It's really, really hard, particularly if you're dealing with really large clients and, you know, really large pieces of business, sometimes it can be really hard to get to the bottom of the actual reason why. So, and you can spend your whole time worrying about that and not enough time, pitching on the next piece of business.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I also think, and this doesn't work all the time, but sometimes that exercise of going through what your proposition is and actually going, what do we have that is truly unique, that the market values, that our competitors actually couldn't replicate or would have a very difficult time replicating? Sometimes that can actually lead you down the path, particularly if you're doing analysis of one business and kind of looking at it and going, what were maybe the deciding factors of us winning this money? That process can be really handy sometimes, and I think oftentimes when we go back talking about a competitive advantage, sometimes you can get a good run of 3 to 6 months where you really can have a bit of a purple patch in terms of winning business just by leveraging one of those key differentiators, as long as it is client-led and it's valued by your clients as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, working at a media organisation at the moment, but now would be a time that I would be looking at what the forecasts are saying revenue's going to be like, how much inventory we've got left, and how we can use that to support our clients that have been there for us over the past, couple of years or however long that period is. So look at things a bit differently. It might not be about, how am I going to scrape together that extra $1,000 whilst I know that's important. How can you support your customers at a time that they really need it in a way that no one else is?
Yeah, really good point. And definitely a great way to draw this to a close around playing the long game. It is all about taking that broader, longer term view here and not being too distracted by the immediate pressure or the immediate competitive threat. It's about going, how do we actually build this thing so that we've got, a viable business, a viable customer base, a viable market to work in for the long term, irrespective of if the market's good or soft or challenging like it will be for the next little while.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
She's withheld her name, which is fine. She's an out-of-home rep. Now, this came to me a little while ago, mate, to be honest with you, and I went back with some answers, but I wanted to bring this to the episode because it's really very much covering over the territory we've been speaking of. So I'm going to read the question. Let's reflect, see if we can give some thoughts and tips. So the question is, I look after 3 major agencies who all have a few very large clients. I've been in my role for 5 years now, and because of this, I know all of my clients and have targeted all of them proactively many, many times. When we do our quarterly business plan, my sales manager is always pushing me to create a hit list of new business with a minimum of 5 target clients and a plan for how I'm going to go and write more revenues against them. I worry that my sales manager just doesn't understand the dynamic I'm faced with and thinks that I might be pushing back or making excuses. I'm super keen to grow revenues, but I'm feeling a bit stale. Are there any suggestions you have for me to refresh my approach to targeting, in inverted commas, new business when I don't have any, inverted commas, new clients?
I think we've all been in this situation, haven't we, where we've been in a role for a number of years, and you walk in, week out, look at your client list, it's like, okay, I've spoken to them, I know where they're at, no, they're not doing anything at the moment, and you feel like there's every excuse under the sun. And you do feel like you know them well, and you feel honestly that sometimes you feel like if you pick up the phone again, they're going to feel like you're absolutely stalking them. But, in that case, I think breaking down your whole, looking at your whole account list management, and firstly, perhaps it's a case of looking at the clients that are spending money and maybe building out a plan for revenue growth from your existing clients. As I mentioned before, it does take time to find new clients, but it's a lot easier to nurture and grow the ones that you've got. We talked a lot before about becoming an industry specialist. Can some really focused research on that client's industry help you identify some new valid business reasons to get in front of that client again? You might identify some new angles that you haven't thought of with a particular client that could lead to some revenue growth.
It's also, mate, what you're saying there is really, it's worth unpacking more, because I agree with you that, there's absolutely opportunity to grow revenues from existing clients. Where I think the mental barrier comes in, because I've been in this situation myself as well, mate, is you almost know your clients too well, right? You know your clients so well that you actually put somewhat of a mental barrier on asking questions.
Yeah, and you're second guessing their response.
Well, that's right. I mean, if I think about the biggest benefit of being a new rep on a fresh territory is you've got a level of permission to go and ask the dumb question, or to go and not have that assumed or prior knowledge. And I kind of wonder with this individual whether there's a way to not simulate that, but a way to actually see if there's anyone in the organization that has fresh eyes, right? So could you, to your point earlier, could you actually lean on the creative resource in your business or a strategic specialist in your business and invite them along to a client uncovery and see if there's a way of opening up some more lateral questioning to get a better understanding of the client and the opportunity there? Yeah,
look, you can even take that at a whole new level as well, mate, because, and I've done this a number of times where actually putting together like a planning day for a client. What if you were to set up something where you could get a number of different people from that client into your office and have a really good value exchange where you could share some perhaps some research that you've been working on, or some particular audience insights, or something specific around their industry that's relevant. Maybe it's a case of bringing in a number of the creative resources from across the business, bringing in some of the C-suite even to just show how important that client is to the business, and facilitating a planning day or a planning afternoon.
I've done a couple of them in the past and they're really effective, particularly if you get the casting right. And what I mean by the casting is, bring in I remember we had like a chief marketing officer, we had like a technology person, we definitely had some creative specialists, but we had the premise of it was to deepen the partnership. And I remember specifically going into the room talking about the broadcast media plan. And I remember leaving the room with a really clear objective of us helping them with a recruitment drive to get staff into the business. Fascinating conversation and a really good example of a new revenue opportunity that could have only been created by having that group of people in the room and really doing that type of uncovery.
Absolutely. And, you think about some of the broadcast channels as well, and the opportunities they've got to deliver some exciting experiences for these clients as well. So you bring them in for a planning day, and then radio's the kings of it, I guess, of going, hey, come in for our planning day, and then some of the talent's going to pop in and have a drink with us afterwards. So there's just nice ways to just show the importance of that client to the organisation, and make it enjoyable, make it a fun experience. The more fun and open those clients are, the more they're going to share, the more you'll uncover. And as we're saying, you'll walk out with an opportunity that you hadn't considered going into the room.
Exactly. And I think also, if you've got a relationship forged over 5 years with a couple of key clients, you're going to have an inherent level of knowledge and trust where probably it's worth actually seeing if you could push out onto the frontiers in some new product innovation with them. I understand to an extent it's like, well, we need to do this in the pursuit of revenue, but it's like, if you've got the ability to go to a client and say, we've done a lot of thinking about your business, we've worked together for a long time, we want to try something new and different in our medium, and we want to try it with you because you're a trusted partner. Like, that kind of stuff is really, really powerful as well.
Absolutely. It's inviting the client in to come in and test and learn some new product, or get involved in a research project that the media organisation might be doing. Some of those exclusive opportunities, just because you're a great client of ours, hey, you're invited into the club. Like, that is super, super powerful and certainly builds on that relationship.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
This one is actually a listener submitted question, and I want to read the whole thing to you because it's quite a nice compliment. You said, "So pumped you're getting Jake on. I love his YouTube videos." So there we go. You've made some traction down here. So the question coming from her name's Portia. She's from Melbourne. I've always been pretty good at prospecting. I usually have a strike rate of about 30 to 40%, or 3 to 4 meetings booked from every 10 phone calls. In the past 5 months, this has gone down significantly. it's taking about 4 to 5 times longer to secure the number of appointments required to hit my KPIs. I've tried a heap of different tactics, like focusing on industry that have been less impacted by the downturn, offering industry reports and market intelligence as a bit of a warm outreach, and generally just doing more research on the company before picking up the phone. It seems to me that prospects either don't have the desire to talk about advertising or just simply don't have the time right now, but I'm not sure if this is something I can control. Does Jake have any thoughts on how to tackle this issue? Any help would be great.
I don't worry about things I can't control, right? And COVID and everything that's happened, I can't control that. If I were Portia and I was doing this, one, like let's go back and talk a little about LinkedIn. I really feel like, email as a channel is just clogged, right? Cold calls to me, I feel like that's why I feel like calls are so good right now. I mean, like you said, people are so nervous to pick up the phone that, that I feel like the calls are great. There's a guy I heard, what he started doing was FaceTiming people's cell phones. Oh, no. Just straight. And he had a VP answer. The guy goes, look, man, I'm going to take this meeting because I got to applaud you. Like this is, so I think I would be trying, there's a couple of things. So one is LinkedIn. And I just want to talk a little bit about it because I do think a lot of your buyers are on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's got a good following in Australia and in key markets and for a lot of roles. That if I was Portia, I would start to be producing 1 or 2 posts that are specific to something that I think my buyers would consume, digital strategy or, digital media or whatever it is that you sell. And then I would be growing my network. Every day I'd be adding 20 to 30 new potential people. And what I mean by that is like, I would start to build a name for myself digitally. And everyone needs to do this. Like if you'd have another takeaway from this outside of the calls is you need to build a name for yourself online. Like you already have a reputation. And I think LinkedIn's a good platform for that. So that would be step one, is I would encourage her to start to play the mid and long game, because guess what? Now those people are going to turn into meetings in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And so then you're not just relying on calls. Now you've got some like organic traction. And then I would be experimenting with things like video and voicemail drops. So again, if you're a first degree connection with someone on LinkedIn, you can send, if you go to the mobile app and you click the plus button, it then says camera, you click video. I can send a personalized video to someone's DM. I can also click, there's a little microphone. I can send a voicemail to someone's DM. I can send a video to their email, too. But on LinkedIn, not enough people are using the voicemail and video feature. I would just do that all day long. If you're like Jake, what's the laziest way to set meetings? I would every day. I can with using Sales Navigator, I can connect with 82 people in 12 minutes. Okay, so every day I'd spend 12 minutes connecting with 82 new people in my network, and then LinkedIn shuts you off. And then once they connected back, I would be interacting with their content, commenting, and then I would be sending voicemails and video DMs, and then doing follow-up calls on top of that. So I just, my advice would maybe be to mix up your channels, start playing the long game, building a network on LinkedIn. That's what I would start to do. I'd start to get more creative.
I think that's a really, really good suggestion for this person right there.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
He's written for me. I run my own niche media publisher, which provides content for a very particular audience to assist them in a decision-making process at a late stage of a buying cycle. Okay, so if we can read between the lines here, effectively it's a very specific type of content that gets produced for people that are a particular life stage that are looking to make a significant purchase. Okay. Our audience proposition is extremely powerful because it's so targeted and is often sought out by an audience that it is at the late stage of a buying cycle. We've investigated a number of different sales channels to get our proposition in front of brands, including going to agencies, going direct to manufacturers, and having trade shows form part of our sales strategy. Based on all of our efforts over the years, it feels like the best approach for us is to go to large retailers who stock a number of different brands and see if we can leverage their supplier relationships to then go and unlock brand money, right? So we're talking about some serious complexity in terms of the sales process here. The question goes on, given there are only limited number of these retailers in the country, and given we have such a specialized offering selling into a complex market, can you offer any insights into how to map out a sales strategy to achieve the outcome that we need to achieve? So I'll add a bit more color and context to this. So this guy is a content guy first, right? Passionate about creating amazing content,
passionate about the audience that he is serving, has been investing a lot of his time, energy, livelihood into this business, is passionate about making it work. He reached out to me and just wanted to kind of get my perspective after hearing the podcast to say, look, how do we get our pricing model right? Who do we go to? The real clear kind of, I guess, issue that they're facing is you've got a lot of different sales channels, but if you want to go and sell into these big retailers, you need to have a really clear strategy because there's only finite clients in this market. So that's kind of the context. Given your experience, given your credentials, if somebody came to you with that challenge, Steve, what might your process look like for helping them draft a sales or go-to-market strategy to unlock revenue from that particular pocket of the market?
It sounds like they are still a relatively emerging business. And it sounds like there is a load of different channels they could go down, and a lot of different sales channels. My advice would be is that I would probably ask them to focus on what is the key channel they should be focusing on, and really dominate that particular channel. And then from there, and be aware where they're at in that process, then start to really broaden their sales process to make sure that they're heading down other sales channels. But if they're not dominant in one of the key sales channels, I think they may end up trying to be all things to all people. And I think it's important that they try to really own one particular sales channel. Look, most of the groups that we represent are large scale, so they're well known and they come with a certain profile in the market. Now, sometimes that profile isn't great either, so we have to work on changing that perception in the market as well. But it does come down to, whether it's a specific or it's a broad sale that you're trying to do, you do need to make sure that you understand who are the decision makers in the business. And I'm astounded how many times we've sat with businesses and with all the software that's available now, whether it's Salesforce or Agile or HubSpot, there's so much out there that can be used to be able to enable you to have a great CRM or a great understanding of clients in the market. And it astounds me still that even though they've bought these softwares, that some of these organizations are just not using them to the level that they should be. So if there was any advice to any salesperson out there, is if they're available, please use these software systems, because it can be the point of difference to you and your competitor. However, a CRM is not going to do the job for you. You have to be the one putting the data in and making sure that you've got all the necessary data going in to be able to utilize these software CRMs accordingly to give you the kind of results that you're going to need to do a greater job than your opposition.
It's a really good point, and I think what it ultimately comes back to as well is what you were saying before, which is you need to actually do the legwork. Like, you need to put the calls into the organization. Try to navigate who potentially the decision maker in a sale like this might be, set up that preliminary uncovery, but really sort of through those conversations, try to build a bit of an org chart, try to get an understanding of how does a decision like this get made? Who are the people that are involved? Could you indulge me a bit and just talk to me a bit more about your business? That kind of stuff does require persistence, and it requires a bit of tenacity, but it also requires a really focused approach. And I agree with you, for even smaller organizations, you'd be surprised, you don't need to go and get a Salesforce subscription or a HubSpot subscription necessarily, or you could subscribe to the free trial packs. You can actually still find some great online resources that could help you with that if you're early in the stage of scaling your media company as well.
Absolutely, Jamie. And look, all of this is extra work, but it is work that it should be interesting to you anyway, to uncover who the key decision makers are and what really floats their boat. This is the kind of stuff that actually sets you up for your career outside of your sales career, where you evolve to in the future. So I think taking this time in your week to step out of the business and focus on actually getting this data down on a spreadsheet or into a CRM or even just into your note taking and understand who's who in the zoo, it's going to be invaluable to you as you progress to making sure that you're talking to the right decision makers, or you're gathering the whole crew of decision makers in that organization that's going to get you across the line.
I agree. And I think, I guess to round this one out, because there's some great topics there, but for this individual, to my mind, the first thing would be to go, let's get the retailers that we want to target down on a piece of paper. Who are they? Let's then get a level of a profile about them. Who are the most desirable? Who are the biggest? Let's go to LinkedIn. Let's use that resource to help us identify who those key individuals are. And, let's do our research in terms of that organization, its structure. Is there a procurement team? Is there a buying team? Are there state managers? Try to kind of create something of a rough map of what the org chart is. But then a lot of it's about just picking up the phone and making the call.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
The question is, I sell a very niche media product, which has a long sales cycle. I won't go into specifics of why this is the case, but for context, it can take 6 to 12 months from my first contact with an advertiser to them potentially coming on board and running a campaign with us. One thing my sales manager drills into us is that we need to keep in touch with clients regularly, so we are top of mind during the internal sales approval process. My sales manager says I should always have something of value to share when I call, so it's not just a standard follow-up call. He suggested things like reading financial news and calling to share something interesting I saw. Does this actually work? And if so, what am I supposed to actually get across that would be worth sharing? I don't really understand much about financial markets. So that one to me just feels like it's very much in I suppose a problem that a lot of the Fear and Greed audience are having.
You've selected it purpose-built, haven't you?
Well, and for context, and I need to disclose this and apologise, this person submitted this question 4.5 months ago, so we're taking our time, but it just felt
it's still relevant, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is absolutely is.
I've had across my career, personally, professionally, sales cycles can be incredibly long. I've had friends in property or in infrastructure, such as building railways. Those are years long, and I think whether it's a short-term media sale or a longer-term infrastructure sale, so many of the principles remain the same. And I hope we've touched on the answer within the conversation we've had today. But look, I think that the sales manager in this case is right. Having something of value to share when you can and call, keep close. That's all true. And I think probably, if I can interpret the question a bit better, or a bit more, I should say, is to say that it's probably about how they do it, and what are some of the tools to get some of that information and then filter it to contextualize so it's actually relevant to the client and not just trite information that they don't need to know. A call for the sake of a call, or trying to talk about something that you really don't understand, because that won't benefit anybody. So look, indeed, that is why one of the many reasons why we created Fear and Greed. It's 20 minutes, in the mornings that can facilitate that information for you. And not just the information, but it gives you the context to understand the why. Not just why a share price went up and down, or someone lost money, or why there's a Royal Commission or the US election, but not just the data, not just the information that happened, but a bit of the why. And that, I think, is the critical part of anyone remembering information, is the story around it. We're human beings. So let's just say, someone you're talking to is in medical supplies and it's a 6 to 12 month sale. What you may not know about that industry very much, but you can certainly, whether Fear and Greed or other media, that there's a pandemic. That supply chains are disrupted. For example, we all heard about how masks were in short supply and medical equipment wasn't enough to be the front line. So, just to draw on one example of a medical client, you'll hear in the news something about that industry that'll be relevant. Or if it's infrastructure, if you're sort of in Sydney, the long journey that the light rail took to be built and just how controversial it got, people love a bit of gossip, So, if there's something in their industry that's happened like that and you're interested in it, chances are they will be too, So, and what does that mean for the campaign that you're talking about? What does it mean for their training environment? And just to share that with them. And it's often, really easy to ask themselves about how they're trading in a month, a quarter, a year, based on something that you've picked up that's happening. So I think it goes back to what we're saying, that the acumen question that you started with, Jamie, is a ripper. I don't think I have a good definition for acumen, but I think the foundations of it are empathy, respect, listening and learning. And if you can keep those things in mind when you're, reading or ingesting or, listening to a podcast called Fear and Greed about the news, use that to think, I've got one of my clients who I can talk to about that, and make a note of it. Remember to do it. Because the best ones can often come spontaneously. They're genuine. You've had a thought about that client, use it, take it. So, and if not, use your CRM, use your customer relationship management database. When was the last time you communicated, called, emailed, but particularly called or met with that person? And know that you should keep that, you shouldn't keep those conversations too far apart, and that there's always something to talk about. Whether it's their personal interests in sports or the industry they're trading in or the market they're in, there's always something to talk about. So I agree with that sales manager's advice, something of value to share. So it's not just a call or a follow-up, but I think what I've tried to do is help that, what to talk about and why. I hope that answers the question.
No, I think you've nailed it. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It's all in the delivery. And I think a lot of salespeople get told that by sales managers. I'm sure in my career, I've been guilty of it too. I think the challenge is for a lot of people starting out, it's how do they interpret and translate that direction into a specific set of sales actions that doesn't come off feeling contrived. And so the way that you've positioned that, I think, is perfect. And the only additional thought I'd add to that is that we probably want to remove sometimes this mental barrier that we need to be presenting ourselves as the absolute experts to clients all the time. If you've got a genuine question or you're intrigued about something in their category, you'd be surprised how effective it is to pick up the phone and ask them for their opinion on something. I wonder whether sometimes, Adam, like picking up the phone and just going, hey, you're in this market, you're in this sector, I've heard this headline. What does this actually mean? Like, I specialize in media. That's my domain. I don't know your industry. What's your perspective on this? Sometimes that actually can absolutely, lead to some really powerful dialogue, and it doesn't require you to be well rehearsed. Now, you don't want to call every client and and ask them a dumb question, but sometimes that can actually really open up a great relationship as well.
No, I completely agree. It's a great suggestion. I think, it really helps, again, business being about people. Don't just look at it as a campaign or a transaction. Look first and foremost at the person that you're talking to as a person, and then in the business they're in and the person that got business challenges that needs to meet them, and marketing is one of them. And so to your, I think, excellent point is, find out more about their business and don't treat it as just a transaction. Ask them something. It's a level playing field. You need to learn from them, hopefully as much as they can learn from you. And I think that's great advice.
You've been listening to Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. Head to MediaSalesMastery.com to help pick the topic, guide the show, and don't forget to subscribe to receive new episodes each week.